This is the Red Podcast.
This is episode number 68, and we're talking about how to get and maintain a connection. If you've got somebody online or offline that you want to have a business relationship with, we'll show you how to do it. That's what we're talking about on this episode of the Red Podcast.
This is the Red Podcast. Real entrepreneur development. Make more money, work less, and live a life of freedom. No BS advice that really works. Here's your hosts, David Hooper and Laurel Staples.
I read an article on the Huffington Post website the other day called The 36 Rules Every Entrepreneur Must Know by Kat Laterzo. And I
Must know. No way around it.
You must know this.
If you got 35 out of the 36, you are screwed.
So tell me if you knew this one, David, because This is number one. And number one is it's all a lie. And she says, the idea that you...
Hang on. This is perfect. This is perfect. This is like maybe the final episode that we're doing like this, and the UPS guy shows up. It's just like that very first episode that we had, because we're getting so much stuff via UPS, and the dog goes crazy every time. And this is more recording studio stuff, Laurel.
Oh, yeah.
So we're good. We're ready to go with this perfect way to end the current Red Podcast recording
I've
situation.
Got to get it.
You better get it, man, because we know our UPS guy. His name is Dakari. He shows up probably 3 to 4 days a week. We get so many books and other things via post or via, I guess it's UPS, not post. So when Dakari shows up and he rings the doorbell, our dog goes crazy. So we can usually hear him because he always honks and he knows us, and we go outside to meet him so the dog doesn't just go completely nuts. But anyway, you can hear Laurel opening the door right now. She said, "Hello, Dakari. Thank you for the package." And she's coming back. And this is not going to happen again because we are now recording in a soundproof room as of the next recording. So here we go. All right. And we're back. Thanks, Laurel. I gave the play-by-play there.
Oh, good. The UPS guy was scared of the spider on the porch, because now we had the spider on the side column, and now he's making a web over the stairs, so we're actually going to have to deal with that now.
It's a very ambitious spider. I actually wrote about the spider on bigboldimpact.com. What spiders know about marketing.
Well, this spider is pretty good. He casts his web and then waits for his customers to come to him so he can eat them.
Well, and if the web gets destroyed, he rebuilds it.
He does.
So let's get back to the 36 rules. If you only know 35 of them, you are in trouble. All 36, because these are must-know rules.
These are must-know. So number one, it is all a lie. She says, the idea that you have to be or to do or have anything in particular in order to create your success is nothing but BS. You get to decide what's important. Yes, you are also the one who has to screw up when you choose something that doesn't work out, but better to do so on your own terms and by figuring things out your own way. What do you think of that?
I agree with that. I actually work with a coach. His name is Trip Lanier, and he's at triplanier.com if you're interested in finding out more about him. And that's one of his big things is assumptions. And we have assumptions coming from everywhere, a lot of them about business that, for example, we have to answer the phone. No, you don't. Who told you had to? Have you tried not answering the phone to see what would happen? So, yeah, I agree with that.
So it is all a lie.
It's all a lie.
But now we're going to tell you what to do on the podcast. So listen up.
Oh, you got any other ones?
I was just going to read you that one.
Just one. Okay, so we can
just one.
Do
we could
this
go through
over
all of
36.
These.
Yeah, the next 35 episodes we'll have must-have advice from Laurel and Laterzo.
There it is.
This is the Red Podcast. We're talking about how to get more clients, sell more products profitably, and build an audience. If you're interested in those things, you are in the right place. This is the podcast for you. If you don't know anybody in your industry, you're in a new industry or just not very social, we're going to talk about ways that you can get connected and, more importantly, stay connected. It's easy to make one-off connections, as I call it, showbiz know people. There are a lot of people that I know. We bump into each other occasionally. Don't really talk outside of maybe parties or just seeing each other out and about, though. If you want those true connections, this is the episode for you.
I like this topic for today because, David, you and I have been talking about my, quote, Project X, which is the business that I'm going to be launching starting on Kickstarter in November, which I'm going to announce soon. But before that, it's called Project X. And I'm getting into a new industry. And so this is really a hot topic for me right now, is to connect with people in that industry. And so these are things that I've been doing and done over the years, and you as well, David. So they're things that you can apply whether you're getting into a new industry or whether you've been in the same industry but want to connect with more people in your type of business niche.
I think there are two ways to go about this. And just looking at it from the outside perspective, think about these two. The first is you need to ask yourself, what value can I add? And who will benefit from that value? But alternatively, you could ask yourself, what do people need and how can I provide that need? So if you're going for some specific person, ask yourself, what value can I add? And if you're going for just a general industry that you want to get connected in, ask yourself, what do people need and what can I do to provide that need?
That's the thing, because you can't just reach out to somebody. I mean, you could, but you shouldn't just reach out to somebody and be like, hey, I'm here. Nobody cares that you're there. You want to offer something to them, add something to their lives. People are busy. You want to stand out by saying, what can I offer this person? And that's really going to establish a connection right there when you're thinking with that specific mindset.
I had a message come in via Twitter, and it's by a guy who used his real name, but he didn't even upload a graphic on Twitter. So there's no icon. He didn't fill in the information, so I have no idea where he's from or who he is, really. And he says, how can I contact you? I have a business matter to discuss. Thank you. Well, you just did contact me, but you didn't tell me anything about your business matter. Laurel, what would you think if somebody approached you like that?
I don't know. That's kind of how you approached me on Match.com. So I say on one end, you might want to take a chance. On the other end, no.
The curiosity, do you really think about that anymore? Like, hey, this could be great. This could be just the thing I'm looking for.
This could be just the business opportunity that I need.
I mean, I think once you go through that a couple times, you kind of get skeptical. And the response you get is usually nothing. I sent a message back to this guy, and I said, well, you have contacted me. What do you want to discuss?
You have to be really clear when you're reaching out with people, either adding value, giving them some sort of value, or being very specific about what you want. I think that's what I get a lot of, is that people aren't specific about what they want. They send me an email or a message, and it's very vague. And I don't like to respond to stuff like that. I feel like they're trying to pull me into some multi-level marketing thing that I don't want to be a part of.
And a lot of times they are.
And they are. So I stopped responding.
Yeah, it's just kind of a churn
people.
and burn approach. I think if you're going to try to get connected with somebody, you have to lay the foundation. And the first thing you would do when laying the foundation is your research. Now, we've talked about that here before on this podcast. We did an episode about how to have a successful conference, how to get connected with people beforehand so you know people when you show up, how to meet the people that you want to meet. That was actually a two-part series, episode number 27 and also episode number 28. If you're interested in those, go to redpodcast.com/27 or redpodcast.com/28. We'll dive into the topic of researching people before you meet them a little bit more deeply on those two episodes. But research is paramount, and it doesn't have to be what they've done for business. It could also be personal research, because that's a great way for you to get connected on a non-business level that may actually be better than the business level that you're trying to reach out on.
Think about if you want to reach out to the press. You're reaching out to a specific reporter, maybe in the New York Times. or something like that. It's going to be so much easier to establish a good connection with that specific reporter if you research what they've written before, what they're interested in, all that kind of stuff. And say you send an email, you could send one of two emails for this example. You could send one email that's like, "Dear so-and-so," or "Good afternoon," or something really general. "Here is my business, and here is why you should be interested in me." Or you could send them an email that says, "I really enjoyed your article that you wrote about social enterprises on this date, and I have a social enterprise, and I thought you might also be interested in what I have to offer." So that person knows that you did some research on them, you like their work, and it's going to engage them more with you than just sending something general. So you do want to have some background on the person.
All people, whether they are president of a company or, like you're talking about, somebody who's writing articles, a journalist, for example, they want support. They want to know that their work is getting out there and their work is touching lives. So I think anything you can do to provide support for those people, to let them know that what they've done has helped you, that's really, really good. You can respond via social media. That's really, really easy. Just a tweet, a retweet, responding quickly via Twitter. That's a super easy way to do it. And when your name keeps popping up again and again, you're starting to form a bond with those people, even if you're not directly connecting them, even if it's just kind of a general question somebody asks and you're responding to it, or if it's just a general link that you're retweeting, for example, you're starting to form a connection. And as you go deeper and deeper into that relationship, you've got that foundation to build upon.
And that's the whole adding value thing that you were talking about.
Absolutely. And there are a lot of ways that you can add value to people. If somebody's selling stuff, this is controversial. A lot of folks will think, "Hey, I'm not going to buy my way in." I'm going to tell you, yeah, buy your way in. If you can hire somebody for an hour of consulting, that's an hour of their time that you can get. It's cheap and easy to pay. Even if it were several $100s for the hour, do it. Shortcut it. Get in there, start connecting with people, and buy your way in. It doesn't have to be just an hour of consulting. Maybe it's a book. We went to a book signing a couple of weeks ago. We had a chance to talk to this guy, had a chance to buy his book, have him sign the book for us. And that kind of support is the foundation for further things that you can do later.
Plus, how many stories have you heard about some of these experts, these internet gurus out there who weren't that way until they connected with somebody else in the space? And they started buying their products and they started going where they go and doing what they do. And then that person kind of helped lift them up. I mean, I see that happen all the time.
It happens all the time because I think when you are putting yourself out there constantly, when you're coming out with content, one, it's very scary to put yourself out there. It's also hard work to constantly come up with new products, new services, and be working. I think people just want to connect with somebody who understands them. And if you're doing something similar, most people I've found want to get to know other people that are doing those things.
So I would say go to these people's events, listen to their podcasts, read their posts, really get connected with what they're putting out there.
And I mentioned the book signing, something like that where you can meet people in person. Very, very, very valuable. Certainly the hour of consulting by phone via Skype, but the in-person stuff, that takes it to a whole new level.
I've talked about on this podcast before that I like to have the 3 points of contact with somebody new that I meet. And one of those contacts I say has to be in person. So say you friend them on social media and you start retweeting their stuff or connecting with them on there. Then you meet them in person and then you have another way via email. Maybe you reach out to them. And so through those 3 points of contact, that person starts to know your name, starts to recognize you, and you've made and established a connection.
Let's talk about maintaining a relationship. You had a successful podcast before I drug you away from it to start doing Red called Go Fire Yourself. A lot of people were reaching out to you. You've been to several events where a lot of people are reaching out to you that way. How do people maintain relationships with you, and what has worked for them to get in touch with you like that?
I think for me, because I'm not really super great at social media, for me, a lot of people have reached out via email, and I know we have a whole episode on how to narrow down your email in your inbox and stop receiving emails. But for me, that's kind of nice. So, for instance, somebody that I met at a conference a couple months ago occasionally sends me just a check-in email. Like, how's it going? How's your book going? How's your business going? And it's just kind of nice to keep that relationship going with that person. So that's one way that I've found that really works for me. But it depends on the person. Like, you might not want to be sending emails to somebody who's really busy and overwhelmed with email, but you might want to connect with them on social media. But I think it's a good way to say, hey, I'm thinking about you, and just check in on you.
I think that's the best thing about Twitter, in that if somebody's going to respond to you, it can be a very short response. They can do that very quickly rather than email. Sometimes people, when they send email, there's like kind of an implied response that they're expecting. Just basic manners. When somebody talks to us, we're supposed to respond, right? That's how manners work in this country. But it's not always that way with email. So if you want a response from somebody and you don't want to put pressure on them, I think Twitter is a great way to do that. I will say that you should respect people's time when sending emails. And Laurel, you've had probably a deeper relationship with these people that you're talking about other than just one-off meetings, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I met with them a couple times, and then you kind of start to do the email thing. This is not going to be for somebody totally new, like, because that'll be annoying. If somebody you don't know starts sending you random emails, that makes you feel kind of creepy. So you got to do it with the right person. But I think if you've established a relationship and you want to maintain it over time, either staying in touch with social media, if that's more appropriate, or doing short little check-in emails every so often.
And this isn't written in stone. It doesn't necessarily have to be something like email or Twitter. Just offhandedly one time when we were starting up the podcast, I mentioned that I play Words with Friends sometimes. Couldn't get Laurel to play with me because I beat her so bad.
That's not true.
And then I gave out my Words with Friends name, which, by the way, is DH1111, and people started popping up on there wanting to play Scrabble with me, basically. And that's a relationship right there. I remember that. It's like, hey, that's a guy from the Red Podcast. And if somebody were to approach me via Twitter or via email, hey, David, I've been playing Scrabble with you for the last month, for the last couple of weeks, that's going to get my attention a little bit more than somebody just coming out of the blue like that guy did on Twitter telling me he's got a business opportunity or business proposition for me.
I don't know. What about that guy that's kicking your butt on there? Would you be nice to him?
Yeah, I like a good game. So if you want to take me up on that challenge, DH1111 on Words with Friends, happy to play you. And we should mention that we're open to get messages via Twitter. We actually like that. It's really quick for us to respond. Sometimes the response is 140 characters or less, and we can get you the information that you need. We are completely open to that. So if you want to ask a question, The Red Podcast is the Twitter name. We're happy to get on there and give you your response to your question or take episode suggestions.
Another way to maintain a relationship, and people have done this with me, is to send helpful articles my way, send books my way. I had one gentleman who was on my podcast, my other old podcast, and said, "Oh, have you heard of this book?" And I said, "No, I've heard of it. I don't have a copy." And he sent me a copy. He followed up a couple weeks later and wanted to get on the phone and discuss it. And it was just kind of a neat way to connect with somebody who lived out of town.
And you know what's funny is that guy reached out to me. I don't think that he knew that we were connected. This was before Red Podcast when we were making it public, really. And I asked you, I said, "Do you know this guy?" He said, "Oh, that's the guy who sent me the book." So right there, I was in on that too. And you never know the connections that people have and the good stories they're going to talk about because of that.
Definitely. I mean, if you send someone a book, that's memorable, especially if it's your own book. That's really memorable.
One time, Laurel, I've got a friend of mine, and I've known him for years, but he's we'll call it a showbiz friend. He's an industry guy. We don't necessarily hang out outside of industry events, but I was interested in getting to know him a little bit better. Saw that he was going to an event, which also interested me, but it was outside of our industry. So I booked a ticket, booked a flight, booked a hotel, and it was a great way for us to spend time together outside of the industry. I think that's another opportunity for you, is to find out where people are going and meet them there.
And another one is throw people a bone. And this is something that's definitely I've done and we've done on Red Podcasts, and that's happened to me is, for instance, a couple months ago, somebody emailed me and said, hey, we just mentioned you on our podcast today, and sent me the link. So they're trying to support me. They're probably asking that I support them. It all kind of goes hand in hand. But I think if you're trying to create a relationship and maintain a relationship, mention somebody, send somebody a client, get somebody, some information that they want, throw them a bone.
Yeah, reciprocity goes a long way. I remember being at New Media Expo earlier this year, and I was going to more of the sessions than you were, Laurel, partly because I would go in and out of them. I didn't really stick around to watch one of them. But I heard your name mentioned at least 3 times from the stage, and I remember telling you about it. That's kind of a cool thing. If you've got a public forum like that, when you mention somebody, people will say, oh, hey, I heard you on blank, heard you on the stage, heard you on the radio. A lot of times when I'll interview a guest on broadcast radio, on my music business show, Music Business Radio, you wouldn't believe how many times the guest will come back to me and say, hey, you wouldn't believe how many people are reaching out to me because of hearing me on your radio show. Anytime you can mention something like that, that's a great way. Even if you're not going direct to people, it will get back to them.
Final thoughts, David?
I think people are busy just in general. And if you are trying to reach out to somebody, don't take it personally. Sometimes email is good for you, but it might not be good for them. Sometimes phone is good for you. I've got a lot of people that say, hey, what's your phone number? I'd like to give you a quick call. Well, I've talked about it here before. I never, ever, ever answer the phone. I'm recording, so I don't have the ringer on because it's just another distraction that keeps me from recording. The best way to get me is via Twitter. And if you were to call me and I didn't respond, or it took me a long time to respond, if you were to email me and I didn't respond, it took me a long time to respond, don't take that personally. I think you can't do that with anybody because people are busy. They're out running their companies. They're not necessarily responding to communication that in some ways is intrusive. I think folks are open to it, but you also have to respect their time and understand that it may take them a while to get back to you. Also think it's important to remember that people are skeptical. I talked about my guy on Twitter. Hey, I've got a business proposition for you, a business opportunity. Well, I've heard that so many times I'm a bit skeptical. So I think that you can relieve their skepticism by showing your vulnerability, providing value first, letting them know you're a real person, even if it's having a Twitter account with a name where they can research and find out a little bit more about you. I think those are the things that will help you to get a response, to help you to build those connections, and to help you have a relationship that goes beyond social media, beyond Twitter, email, phone, and becomes a real friendship.
One last note, I just want to say, don't just contact people when you need something. That is not building a relationship. That's just being annoying.
Yeah, relationships. If you look at the word, it's relating to somebody. It's a two-way street. It can't be just you. And that's a great way to just get completely written off just by asking. Don't be an asshole. That's what we say.
It's all a lie, David.
You got questions or comments? We would love to hear from you. Laurel and I are available to answer those questions at redpodcast.com. There you'll find all our back episodes. You can search by category. You can search by search. And you can provide episode ideas and suggestions if you have those. We'd also appreciate if you would help us to build the Red Real Entrepreneur Development community. We are always looking to add people to it. And one of the ways you can do that is by leaving us a review on iTunes. If you listen via iTunes or you've got iTunes, just pull it up, search for Red Podcast. You can leave us a review just like that. That'll help us come up better in the search engines. More people find us, and we all become one bigger happy family. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time on the next episode of the Red Podcast.
You've been listening to Red Podcast, Real Entrepreneur Development. Subscribe today using iTunes, Stitcher, or via RSS at redpodcast.com.